Assalamu alaikum. This is my first time in the Middle East, my first time here in Jordan, and I'm excited to be here, and I thank our hosts for inviting me. Not only that, but people keep asking me, so where am I going on my tours? Everywhere except Petra. And people say, why? It's because I want to leave the best for a return visit. Okay, it's acceptable. There you go. So, just to give you a little background on me, I am probably one of the models you don't want to give to your children in terms of how to create a career. I am overeducated and totally unemployable. Nobody would ever hire me because I have too many degrees in areas that have absolutely nothing to do with business and productivity. I have 2 doctorates, 2 masters, and an undergraduate degree, all of them in humanities. Now, I love humanities. I taught literature. I taught philosophy. They're my favorite subjects, but you don't get a job. It's as simple as that. And so I had to learn very quickly, how am I going to feed myself? And the way I did that was to create a company. I learned that I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't know that. It's a journey of discovery. And so as we encourage our children to go forward into the future, encourage them to discover, not just to work. That's what makes it exciting. And so, in case you haven't realized it yet, we are no longer in the 20th century. Okay? If that stuns anybody in this room, I'm sorry for that. But we are no longer in the 20th century. All right? It sounds obvious. We're actually in the 21st century. And that's actually core to what it is I'm going to be talking about. What we did in the 20th century may not be operable as we move forward in the 21st century. So what I am going to talk about is not how to improve your existence or your work or your processes, but how to upset absolutely everything that you think you should be doing in order to be successful. So I'm going to be the bane of your existence for the next 15, 20, 30 minutes. All right? So, meeting the challenges of 21st century supply chain logistics. That's my topic. 21st century, that's key. That makes it different from the 20th century, and I'll say why. Challenges, that is what we face. I have no solutions for you. I only have challenges. We need challenges, otherwise we get bored. I get bored really easily, so I like to challenge other people. And on top of it, I talk about supply chain logistics as a totality. Not supply chain and not logistics separated. And there are reasons for that, and I'll explain that. So, having said all that, I think I've learned the technology, so I think I can move on. When we started the Logistics Institute, and I say we because it was a group of people in the government of Canada that actually created the Logistics Institute, and then they forced me to run it. Forced, that's kind of a strong word. But our mantra back then, 30 years ago, was logistics is a driving force of human achievement. I like that because there's nothing that we do, nothing that we even attempt to do does not involve logistics. What do we mean? Well, okay. This was supposed to be interactive, but it came up all at once. We cannot create monuments without logistics. All right? We cannot build cities without logistics. We can't buy food without logistics. We can't hold events. We can't explore oil or do mining or manufacturing or transportation without logistics. We can't have races, Olympics, or the most important event that we can organize is a birthday party for a 5-year-old. All right? You have to have logistics. It is the driving force of all the things that we can achieve. Because we buy, we transport, we warehouse, which is a deployment strategy. We replenish, which is an inventory or asset strategy. We distribute, we sell, we deliver, and an international trade environment, we export and import. All right? Our approach at the Logistics Institute to 21st century logistics is it is an international business strategy. And what I want you to realize here is that this organization of the field of expertise is a market-driven strategy. This is not a corporate strategy. And there are reasons for this. Unfortunately, all of the dynamics of my slides seems to be lost, but I'll try to go on. We don't deliver products, folks. We deliver value. And if you haven't figured out what that is, I'm going to ask you to think about it. Products are products. We don't even compete in terms of products. We compete in how we deliver value, what value is in a global market. So think of that. It's a fundamental strategy. It is the business strategy, delivering value. Having said that, we organize ourselves around networks and channels. Networks is upstream, managing supply. Channel is downstream, dealing with demand. Notice I didn't say customer. I said demand. That's different. That is our supply chain strategy. But what's fundamental is this process right here. And the process is an integrated logistics process. Yes, we procure, we have asset management, and we have a distribution transportation strategy. This is the logistics strategy that supports the supply chain strategy, that supports the business strategy, which is to deliver value. And the enablers are these pieces down at the bottom of the pyramid. Information system is an enabler. It's not the business. I ran into a company recently in Canada that is trying to organize itself around a new product and a new sector. I won't talk about cannabis, but you can think about that on your own. And what they're doing is implementing an ERP. They haven't organized their company in terms of their operations. They don't know how to run the company. They're expecting an ERP to run the company for them. That is not what you do. It's an enabler. It isn't your business. Policies and procedures, whether they're internal or external, facilities and equipment that we either own or lease. And then, unfortunately, under this arrow is the corporate structure. So corporate structure is important, but it's an enabler of delivering value in the marketplace. So this approach to supply chain logistics is about international business, yes. It is a strategic approach, yes, but it's a market-driven approach. Because if we don't have satisfied customers in terms of our value and the value we deliver, what's the point of the rest of it? It makes no sense. This, by the way, is a model that I created thinking about Amazon. Amazon doesn't sell products. If you talk to or listen to Jeff Bezos, he'll tell you automatically, we don't sell anything. We create a buying experience. We are about value, the value of wanting to buy. What you buy is immaterial as far as he's concerned. The fact that you want to buy using his platform is the value that he's talking about. And that's what he sells, value. Okay, well, let's leave it at this. A number of years ago, there was a research done by MIT, and it became the basis of what we designed as an excellence model, a supply chain excellence model, supply chain logistics excellence model. And the supply chain logistics excellence model is both involves external as well as internal forces and internal capabilities. So we've talked about this, you all know this, it's economics, trade regulations, geopolitics, labor laws, green laws, technology as an external force and a constant change in technology, demand trends, demographics, competitive landscape. Internal issues are about manufacturing, distribution, information, how we handle information, how we process it, how we use it, not how we just access it. Human resources, having the right people with the right skills in the right places doing the right things. Materials and parts and infrastructure. What's interesting, and it was mentioned earlier today, when we talk about materials and parts and we talk about manufacturing, there is an emerging reality, and it's been mentioned several times since we started, around nano manufacturing. Nano manufacturing is supported by 3D printing. And I have a quick story on that. One of the interesting partners that we work with is Doctors Without Borders. This is not what I would call the most advanced group of people in terms of supply chain and logistics. However, what they've discovered is when they're dealing with an event, say a hurricane or any other issue, mostly hurricanes, in any part of the world where everything collapses, the infrastructure in particular, what they've discovered is that for them to deliver medical help, they would bring in container loads of all kinds of equipment, let's say splints. How many splints do you think they would need? Well, a whole container load of splints, because you've got people with broken arms and broken legs of all sizes and ages. What they discovered is, by the use of 3D printing, they could bring in the raw material to make splints, and they make it on the spot, as they need it, and customized to the size of the person who needs it. That's all they need is electricity. And by the way, they bring their own generators. They even depend on the systems. So what we're talking about is massive changes that are occurring in what we would call the ordinary things that we're engaged in. Nanotechnology, 3D printing. That's going to revolutionize manufacturing. Period, full stop. And if you haven't thought that through, I'm asking you to. One of our earlier speakers actually said, don't think outside the box, jump out of the box. That's what I'm asking you to do. Don't think out of the box. How are you going to jump out of the box? Make it different. So we have external forces, we have internal capabilities, and my position is that supply chain logistics is a competitive advantage. It's not a backroom process. That's what the 21st century difference is. It's no longer operations in the back room. It's a competitive advantage in a global market. So let's look at competitive advantage, and there are two approaches. A typical one is Michael Porter and his competitive forces, and I'll quickly go through that. And then there's this other approach to competitive advantage, and that is resource-based, or an internal capability, from Jay Burney. So, having said that, this is what is a typical approach that Michael Porter would have taken. There are 5 forces: competitive rivalry, threat of new entries, buyer power, threat of substitution, and power, supplier power. If you know anything about competition, if you read anything about competition, this is the standard approach. That doesn't make it old hat, doesn't make it obsolete, but it does make it a standard approach when we think of competition as between companies. Right? And yes, there is competition between companies, obviously. So we're not saying no. What we are saying is, how do we handle these 5 forces? All right, so competitive rivalry, really the key piece here, what's the quality or qualitative difference between ourselves and any of our competitors? Notice the language, it's about quality. All right? It's the quality difference that makes the difference. How are we different from somebody else based on quality? Because that's associated with and attached to value. When we talk about new entries, some of the things to think about is, in comparison with us, what are the economies of scale? What are the cost advantages of working with us versus somebody else? All right? When we think of the buyer power, now let's be blunt. Every one of our customers has power over us. Why? We want to make a sale. Not only do we want to make a sale, we want to make it at a profit. But we also have customers who can be pretty obnoxious. As a matter of fact, there's research that says most customers are obnoxious. But let's not push that one too far. However, what differentiates us in terms of the buyer power? Why are they buying from us versus anybody else? What is it that we offer that's different in services or products, in value? Threat of substitution. Is your operation so ordinary that anybody can just replace you and therefore substitute somebody else for you? That's a key piece, because often enough we engage in the ordinary because it's convenient. Well, the convenient is not enough. And then finally, suppliers. Okay, suppliers have a lot of power. They can determine a lot of things. You know, how important are they to our organization and to our work? How unique are their services? How closely tied are we to our suppliers that we can't get away from them or find replacements, which in itself is locked into a supplier network. Okay, I'm not going to do this, deal with this in detail, primarily because, not that I'm advertising, I am speaking tomorrow for 2.5 to 3 hours, and this is going to be one of my key topics. So if you want to come and, you know, look at this a little more deeply, we can talk about it tomorrow. But if we look at the 5 forces, and we say competitive rivalry, so what are the number and strengths of our competitors? How strong are they? How integral, how necessary are they to our success? Supplier power. How easy is it for our suppliers to increase their prices because they have a stranglehold on us? Buyer power. How easy it is for our buyers to drive down our prices, to make demands, make it cheaper, make it cheaper, make it cheaper. This is a great threat to the transportation industry, especially trucking in North America, especially dealing with the automobile manufacturers, because you'd be locked into a route with a contract, and every year you'd be asked to reduce your price by 5%. All right? Well, that could put you out of business pretty darn quickly. Or even worse, every year you're not locked into, or you don't have a guarantee route. It's farmed out again, and it becomes a competitive thing. So because the automobile company is looking for the cheapest rate, not the quality service, but the cheapest rate. So the threat of substitution, can your customers find a different way of doing things? In other words, I know this is a tech conference. In other words, as your customers increase their capability using technology, can that actually eliminate you because they are now doing it in-house? Big problem. And then, of course, new entries is how safe are you in your own market? So, going back to the competitive advantage and the pursuit of excellence model, let's look at J.B. Burney and internal. Now, this actually is what is lost often enough when we talk about competition. When we talk about competition, it's always them versus us. Well, what about us? And Burney was interesting in that he focused on us and the internal capabilities of competitive advantage. And he raised the question, which I think is a very serious question that all of us should ask ourselves repeatedly, and that is, what makes our business unique? What makes your business unique? What makes you different from everybody else in this room? And the focus that he put on it is, do you have excellent leadership? Do you have brand portfolio? Is your brand strong in the marketplace? Do you have strong partnerships? Do you have teams and teamwork? Collective approach to things. Do you have a strong financial position? Do you have a global presence, or are you just local? There's nothing wrong with being just local, by the way. There's nothing wrong with being niche. But always recognize that even no matter how niche we are, we're also globally connected, because that's the way the world works nowadays. Do we have well-managed processes? So here we go. This is process alignment. And then, of course, how innovative are we? We keep using that word innovation. I have a whole course on innovation. I'm not making a sale here. You might have to come to Canada, and I'll put you through the paces on innovation. But I'm not going to do it here. It's a whole other approach. So having said that, Bernie went on to create a focus on company resources. And he said there are 3 kinds of company resources, 3 kinds of capital, he called it. Physical capital, human capital, and organizational capital. Physical, it's our physical technology, it's our information technology, which makes us different from everybody else. It's our plant and equipment, it's our geographical location, it's geo-positioning, and it's, of course, access to raw materials. Human capital, do we train our people? Do we build on their experience? Do we use judgment? Or do we just command? Do we actually value intelligence, the intelligence of the people who work with us? Notice I said work with us. I didn't say who work for us. I don't use that language. Do we actually have relationships internal with the different departments, our different people? Do we value leadership, especially in our managers, not just people at the top in the C-level? And of course, do we value the competence of our workers? Organizational capital, what's our reporting structure? All right? What's our formal and informal planning capability, our controlling capability, our coordinating systems? And of course, what's our informal relationships among the groups within and between our company and those we do business with? Relationships being the key there. And he went on to talk about something that it's a very strange acronym, where he says a resource-based view relies on resources that are both tangible and intangible, that must be heterogeneous and immobile, with VRIO attributes. Ooh, what the heck is that? Well, I'll explain what that is. If you have all of those things and they're aligned in the right way, you can build competitive advantage. And so VRIO is your resource or capacity and your capability valuable? If not, well, you're at a competitive disadvantage. If it is, then the next question is your resource or your capacity and your capability rare? By that I mean unique. If not, well, you might be competitive in the same way other companies are competitive. But if it is, then the next question is your resource or capability not only valuable and rare, but is it expensive to imitate? There's the I. If no, well, you might be temporarily competitive, but you're not going to last very long. But if yes, and then you go on to say, if my internal capability, my company and its processes and its resources are valuable, rare, costly to imitate, therefore nobody can steal them, imitate me, and I'm organized to capture and create value, then you have sustainable competitive advantage, not just competitive advantage. Big difference between those two. Competitive advantage is when a company implements a value-creating strategy not simultaneously implemented by anybody else. All right? But a sustained competitive advantage is all of that plus when these other firms are unable to duplicate the benefits of our strategy. What's unique about your company? That is what makes you competitive. Having said all that, so that's more or less background. Now, I want to focus on supply chain logistics as a competitive strategy, not as an operating backroom function-oriented process. Supply chain logistics, this is my challenge, is a competitive advantage in a global market that moves supply chain and logistics from the back room to the front room to the C-level in strategic planning for success. 21st century supply chain logistics. And so I'm going to have a series of quotes. 21st century supply chains have transformed into worldwide, interconnected supply and demand networks, exposed to the vulnerabilities of our uncertain world and with profound interdependencies. This has led to greater deployment of collaborative partnerships. These are all key. They're highlighted for a very specific reason. Frequently involving outsourcing and offshoring, creating elongated webs that embrace multiple stakeholders. Now, I want you to keep in mind as I go on, the word web, very different from a chain. And that's how we're rethinking supply chains in the 21st century. Consequently, supply chains have morphed into today's multi-layered, interwoven distribution systems that facilitate more effective trade between companies, cities, and countries. That's Mark Miller. He's out of the UK, and he wrote this book that was published in, well, actually, this is a blog, but his book was published in 2018, and that is How Supply Chain Drives Competitive Advantage. So it's a repositioning of supply chain and logistics. In the Financial Times, this is a quote, and I'm actually glad of one of our earlier speakers because he used the same language. Supply chain logistics is a business ecosystem. It's not a supply chain. It's an ecosystem. It's a network of interlinked companies that include suppliers and distributors who interact with each other, primarily complementing and supplying key components to deliver value. Notice I didn't say products. All right? And so Financial Times actually refers to supply chain logistics as a business ecosystem. Business ecosystem is not the same as a linear understanding of source to final consumer. Modern supply chains are no longer simply linear chains or processes. I'm going to stop here so nobody lynches me. You need to have linear processes. You need to be efficient. You need to have technology to support that efficiency. But you need to get out of the box, not think out of the box, but jump out of the box and think beyond supply chain. They are complex networks. The products and information flows travel within and between nodes in a variety of networks that link organizations, industries, and economies. Martin Christopher, the Cranfield School in the UK. So, if we begin to think of supply chain and logistics as an ecosystem, we can now think of it as competitive advantage and a way to differentiate ourselves from others. Because a powerful supply chain gets products to markets faster, more efficiently, and more economically than the competition. Now, this is the impact of what we call the Amazon effect. As I said, Amazon doesn't sell products, doesn't deliver products, doesn't care about products. It created a culture around buying. It created an e-commerce culture around buying. And that's his competitive advantage, his platform, right? And it differentiates him from everybody else. That doesn't mean we all have to become Amazon, but it does mean we have to think about the impact of Amazon on what we do on an everyday basis, whether we move or make cement or concrete, whether we make products or sub-assemblies or whatever. This is the way we have to rethink what it is we do on an everyday basis. So, a supply chain ecosystem and marketing. Now, this is the new world of competition in the 21st century. It's built on supply chain ecosystems and the traditional 4 Ps of marketing. They are the principal business drivers, embracing all the mission-critical business activities to drive business growth, increase market share, and generate revenue. All right? This is how we run our businesses. And so what does that mean? Competitive advantage and market differentiation is all about taking this very traditional approach of marketing, the 4 Ps, and supply chain, and saying this is core to how we compete in global markets. Because this, by creating this, by managing this, we create a process, a company that is valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and organized to capture and deliver value. It makes us different from everybody else. Why is this important? Well, it was touched on earlier. We have what I call the shifting market dynamics, the emerging market channels. This is a very traditional market channel. We're all familiar with it, especially if we go and buy things like groceries and retail. It's the seller's a wholesaler, retailer, buyer. That's a very traditional bricks and mortar approach to market. If we go global, it's an expansion of that. So this is very 20th century. Globalization has led us to take the traditional and expand it in different ways. But it doesn't radically change it. It's still the same, multi-echelon. This is the new world of marketing. It's the e-commerce market, and it's direct seller-buyer relationship, where there may be an e-platform between those two, but not much more. This is Alibaba. This is Amazon. This is what we face going forward as 21st century business people. What does that mean? Well, we still have indirect channels as supply chain people. Retailers, resellers, distributors, they're still around. So the connection between marketing and customers is the usual indirect channel. But there are now direct channels where we have web, telecenters, and a direct sales approach to things. These are the market entries, the expansion of how we enter markets. This is now supply chain. It's both direct and indirect. It's no longer just one thing. And of course, there's demand. And demand is constantly changing, shifting. Whether it's retail or B2B, it doesn't really matter. B2B, B2C, C2C, Q to A, I don't care. This is reality. This is very traditional. This is the traditional market dynamics. We're all used to this. We all work in this kind of a context where we have raw materials, sub-assemblies, and finally product. All right? Then the product is delivered, all right? And it's B2B, as we said earlier today, and B2C, whether it's retail or on a commercial basis, or it's company to company. All right? Very traditional. We're all used to this. This is the world. This is the ocean in which we swim as traditional supply chain logistics. This is the impact of IoT. Now we have the head office. The head office now develops a global sourcing strategy. Somewhat traditional, tier 1, tier 2, going into manufacturing. However, there's a supply chain channel strategy that's a little different from the traditional. Yes, we have the intermediaries in the middle, DCs, third parties, distribution wholesaler, still there. We have the traditional B2C because we have stores and malls, retail customers, where point of sale information is important because that releases product, all right? But now we have this world, this invisible world of e-commerce, where a sale is online and a delivery is direct. All right? The traditional approach to supply chain is developing replenishment plans. The more advanced in the 21st century is developing customer direct plans. Because that's what bozos will tell you in Amazon. If you're not customer centric, you'll lose. Everything is about the customer. It's not about the store that then has a customer. You have customers, no matter who they are. And by the way, that's at a retail, commercial level. But what is the impact of IoT on our world of supply chain? It's called disruption. That whole part up there is disappearing. But there's something else that's occurring. And some of us have to be aware of this. It's called disintermediation. The elimination of multiple players in the supply chain. Why? Well, the head office doesn't need you anymore. Okay? They might be interested in the last 50 kilometers and nothing else. So disintermediation is, there are whole elements within the traditional global supply chain that are no longer useful because they no longer meet the demand. All right? So disruption we all talk about. I want us to think about disintermediation and what company here might be affected by that. We have to rethink supply chains and supply chain logistics. It's multidimensional, it's interorganizational, and it's all about relationships. It's not a direct line. What I like about this slide is how many players there are and how many players we can become within this, because our role shifts depending on where we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. We aren't just the core enterprise. We might actually be an offshore, we might be overseas, we might be all of these things at different times within a process. So, multidimensional, interorganizational, focused on relationships. We have to think in terms of complex global value webs. This is a Deloitte study. This is the result of a Deloitte study. And I find this fascinating because I ask you to think about web. Supply chain logistics is not a linear model. It's a value web. And this is the fundamental change being occurring because of big data. But I'm just going to leave this without talking about big data. I'll talk about big data tomorrow. So the traditional supply chain is linear. You know, competition is about product. The 21st century supply chain is a value web, where each element within that web has value. And what's the most important thing? Knowledge, information, technology. That is the future that has already arrived. And so if we work and live in complex, dynamic, and connected value webs, and I'm telling you, yes, we do, then the value is the knowledge that we exchange among the different players in that value web. Because we don't deliver products, we deliver value. So, the linear supply chain, traditional, complex, global value webs. The new emerging understanding. So, what do we mean? What do we have to transfer? What do we have to do to be different? Well, we have to transform our thinking from value-based on production of products and services, which is a push economy. We have to begin to think about value based on knowledge exchange that drives proactive production of goods and services, a pull economy. What does that mean? We have to redefine the macro, micro, and company economics. Traditional economics is not the same. We have to transition from transactions as the primary business goal to creating knowledge sharing networks as the primary business goal, based on insights gained from big data in particular. It redefines competition and competitive advantage through what is now called disruptive innovation. That's what this is. This is 21st century supply chain logistics. Having said that, we have to embrace something, this is my favorite picture. We have to embrace complex randomness. because there is no simple solution. This diagram, or this picture, it comes from World Economic Forum, Davos. And the owner and CEO of Agility Worldwide was being interviewed and asked, so what is supply chain logistics? And he randomly started talking. And as he was talking, somebody wrote down everything that he was talking about and created this slide, which of course I'm stealing and using and unethically doing so. And what I like about it is it's not linear, but it identifies all the key issues: risk, opportunity, complexity, resilience, mitigation, the impact, pricing, policy, new models. So he talked about this is supply chain logistics in the 21st century. And what does it mean? What it means is in our rethinking supply chain logistics, we have to think in terms of complexity. We have to also recognize that complexity is natural. Complications only arise when we fail to recognize the inherent complexity of doing business. Business is complex, period, full stop. And if you thought it was simple, too bad, so sad. Doesn't work that way. It never did, right? There are no simple solutions. There are many options and different strategies to be implemented depending on the situation. Very situational. How do you run a business in a situational modality? Very difficult, and it takes a lot of courage. Whatever we plan, reality is unpredictable. Being prepared for the what if is about managing risk and resilience. Okay, so how do we meet this challenge? I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'm going to actually suggest a few things for us to think about. Because we at the Logistics Institute have been wrestling with these very same issues for the last 20 to 30 years. This is not new. There are three things that we need to do in order to be successful. I know it's a reductionistic notion, but it isn't. We need a strategy, we need a process, and we need people. Strategy is where do we want to go? Process is how are we going to get there? And people is who's driving the bus? It's as simple as that. The Logistics Institute focuses on people. Other groups focus on strategy and process. How do we build success? Well, capability, competence, and credentials. There are three things. Capability, the ability to do the job. Competence is having the right balance of SKAs, skills, knowledge, and aptitude, in order to sustain our ability to do the job. This is for companies as well as for individuals. Credentials, public identifiers that certify our claims that we are ready and able to do the job. Well, for a company, what does that mean? A track record, a success record, satisfied customers. We don't have that in our quiver as arrows, then we don't have any credentials. Nobody's going to trust us. And so what we did 30 years ago is to create a professional model in global supply chain logistics. We're called officially Canadian Professional Logistics Institute. We were created by 12 logistics organizations who came together as a consortium with a business plan that was presented by the government to the government of Canada that then gave this group $2.5 million in seed funding just to get it started. We're also called the Logistics Institute. That's our short title. That's our logo. What's interesting is we're a federally incorporated Canadian company. We're not for profit, but our vision is global. What we want to do, and this is a bit of a pitch I'm giving to you, is we want to bring professional certification in supply chain logistics to the world. Now, I'm going to be very clear. We're not going to bring us to the world. I'm not Harvard, okay? I don't have that kind of reputation. I'm looking for partners, in-house, in-country partners who say, this is valuable for our people, our sectors, our companies, our nation. We have some models that may work, but need to be adapted. So we want to be a guide in creating something, say, here in the Middle East. In order to meet the challenge of 21st century supply chain logistics. So, in-country partnerships, private and public sector groups, that's what our aim is. So, our value proposition is to establish professional designations as public statements of leadership and credibility around the world. It's about being leaders and about being credible. It's about fostering global professional communities supporting worldwide business, trade, and economic developments among and between professionals. This is a very bold statement. I'm going to tell you just how bold it is. What we want to do is take globalization and global trade and make it the responsibility of an individual who's a professional, not the responsibility of nations who write treaties. All right? Globalization is something we do, not something we talk about. And it's people who do it. We have to have the ability to do that. What's the competitive advantage? It's about competencies, it's about being competitive, it's about a skilled workforce in the new economies as they are emerging, and it's about a competent labor market for a nation. The capacity is about sustaining and enhancing competitive leadership in the world. Now, that's about nations. By the way, I work a lot in China. And there are lots of reasons why people are afraid of China. I'm not afraid of China. I really don't care who's the first economy or the second economy or the 12th economy. I want to work with people who want to be successful, period. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what your government looks like. Despite the fact I can't read your language and I don't speak your language and I don't know, I can't understand a word you're saying, I nonetheless want to work with you. And I've been working in China since 2004. It's about competitive leadership in the world, built on skills and competencies. And so, what's going to differentiate us? It's about being competent and trustworthy as individuals and as companies. And what we have developed over the years and we deliver is a competency-based learning strategy. We're not a school. We don't have a book. You know, unlike one of our predecessors, the doctor and research and all that, we don't do that. We look at skills and what are the skills requirements in order to be successful. And then we develop programs around those necessities, market-driven. It's about training, skills, and professional development. It's about the ability to apply and implement what we put you through. It's about developing tools and the capacity to succeed. It's about competence, not just about knowledge. And it's about the right balance of SKAs. Skills, the ability to do something, knowledge, the ability to know what to do, and aptitude, which is the ability to do it well. And so what you learn from us, what you would encounter with us and through our programs, you should be able to use the next day in the workplace. And we have different professional designations. LS is logistics specialist, PLOG is professional logistician, SC is supply chain, and in these different categories to meet the needs of 21st century supply chain logistics. Applied innovation, supplier relationship management, international project management, risk and resilience, and then lean processes. And we gear it to the needs of the entire company. LS is for your frontline supervisor and managers, junior managers. PLOG is for your supervisors, managers, and directors. Skills have to be through the whole company. It can't just be one or two people. SC is your manager and director, and of course, we focus on executives as well. Why? We need to be competent. We need to have the credentials as professionals in order to meet the challenges that I have outlined very briefly in 21st century supply chain logistics. And so, what do we cover in our programs? Notice I'm not giving you our programs. I have information. I have a website. Tomorrow I'm speaking a little longer on this. And so I'm just going to give you highlights. And I have some brochures, but not enough for all of you. So we'll take it from there. There's ways. I also have about 300 business cards, so I'd like to unload those 300 so you can all take them. So going back to our value approach, our market-driven approach to supply chain logistics, what do we do? Well, we start at a very strategic level. What are the supply chain issues that we need to look at? Competitive advantage, as I just described. What is competitive advantage? What are the elements? It's about value, responsibility, competition, and leadership. Actually, responsibility is about the circular economy. All right? It's also about optimization. And what I want to highlight here is the network design versus inventory optimization. Inventory optimization is a traditional approach to supply chains and logistics. Reduce our inventory, sell, 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 get it through the process. All right? We don't want to have any inventory on hand. Well, you know what? You can't have inventory optimization unless you have a strong network. So you have to actually start with network design before you start dealing with inventory optimization. And so we focus on that. As we move more into management and processes, we talk about supply management, SRM, and it's about strategic sourcing. It's about supplier selection. It's about supply management, and it's about procurement and their processes. And then, of course, there's demand management, which is developing channel strategies in terms of sector differences, product differences, distribution networks, and distribution management. And then the clincher in our programs is about leading success. Really, it's about building trust. And how do we do that? Well, it's about managing and developing, actually developing and managing relationships. It's about how do we identify and move to converge interests? How do we build trust? And how do we deal when it breaks down? Because you know what? All relationships break down, whether they're personal or otherwise. All right? So we have to deal with how do we deal with the breakdown of relationships. And so core to our programs is what you would identify and I would identify our core logistics. So it's logistics, purchasing, inventory, warehousing, and transport. Yes, we cover some of that. Beyond that, we focus on leadership, team, ethics, project management, relationship management, talent competency management. Then, of course, the big world that we work in is applied innovation, value, competition, competitive advantage, risk and resilience, globalization, lean, network design, inventory optimization, excuse me, and supplier relationship management. Our programs focus on operational excellence, and they focus on strategic leadership. Expertise at an operating level and at a strategic level, very important, but being a leader is equally important, and so we try to balance the two. Having said all that, there's my sponsor, there's the company, there's our website, www.loginstitute.ca. Please explore, find out whatever information you can. Take my business card. Tomorrow you may have an opportunity to talk to me. I welcome it. I look forward to it. I would enjoy it. As you can tell, I like to talk. And so that in itself would be interesting. And the reason for that is we firmly believe that logistics is the driving force of human achievement. Thank you.